24 hours before the death of Pope Francis, surveillance cameras at the southern entrance of the Vatican accidentally capture Keanu Reeves. He steps out of a car without any security. He enters inside, and he is not seen again. The next day, the Pope dies. A few days later, a viral video emerges. Keanu sitting in a dimly lit room, speaking only one sentence. "He asked me not to fear the light." What was it? Why did the Pope meet with an actor on the eve of his death? Why did Keanu disappear? In this video, you will learn everything that is known, and something that no one has yet dared to reveal. Early in the morning, just 24 hours before the Vatican would officially announce the passing of Pope Francis, the air in Rome was unusually still. The cobbled streets around St. Peter's Square, usually vibrant with the murmur of tourists and pilgrims, felt heavy with anticipation, though no one could yet explain why. A gray mist lingered low, softening the silhouette of the basilica against the awakening sky. Beneath this atmospheric haze, a black vehicle pulled up quietly to an unmarked service gate near the Vatican's southern wall. The car was discreet, its windows tinted, and no insignia or diplomatic plates betrayed its purpose. From it stepped a man cloaked in a long, dark coat. His face was unmistakable. Keanu Reeves, the global film icon known for both his roles in blockbuster action films and his enigmatic public persona, emerged without entourage or fanfare. He looked over his shoulder once before approaching the gate. A figure awaited him there, a man in a long clerical robe, his head slightly bowed, his identity concealed by the hood of his cassock. The two exchanged no visible greeting, no embrace or formality. They simply nodded, as if confirming something already understood. The gate opened from within, and both men disappeared into the shadows of the corridor beyond. Across the street, in the upper floor of a residential building, a freelance photographer was adjusting his camera. He hadn't been following Reeves. He had been tipped off anonymously just an hour earlier with vague instructions. Be near the Vatican early. Watch the side entrances. At first, he had dismissed it as nonsense, but something about the tone of the message had pulled him out of bed. And now, through the long lens of his Canon, he captured the few fleeting seconds when the actor slipped into the Vatican's inner sanctum. The clicks of the shutter echoed softly in his silent apartment. Within the hour, the images made their way to several private Telegram groups, first among local journalists, then to a broader circle of digital sleuths, bloggers, and conspiracy theorists. The photos were grainy but clear enough to identify Reeves. One shot, in particular, began to gain traction. Keanu's profile in stark contrast against the Vatican wall, the shadow of the priest beside him elongated by the morning light, as if from a noir film. The post was shared in Twitter threads, sent via WhatsApp, and discussed on niche forums. Within 6 hours, however, the images began to vanish. The original Twitter post was removed. Telegram channels started deleting messages without explanation. A Reddit moderator archived the thread citing privacy concerns. The photographer, when contacted later by reporters, denied ever taking the images. His social media went silent. A cached version of the photo remained briefly on a lesser-known Catholic news blog before their servers mysteriously went offline. Questions began to circulate in media spaces. Was Keanu meeting the Pope in secret? What was the purpose of the visit? Why had no one from the Vatican mentioned his name or presence? Attempts to verify his location that day led nowhere. His official schedule was empty. His team did not respond to emails or phone calls. A source close to his agency claimed he had flown to Europe for a private retreat, but refused to provide a destination or dates. Commentators on morning shows dismissed the idea of a secret meeting as fan fiction, but internet communities were less willing to let it go. On YouTube, amateur investigators began piecing together timelines and satellite data, overlaying the location of Reeves' last known whereabouts with flight records and social media posts. A viral TikTok video overlaid the surveillance photo with eerie music and captions like, "Why was Keanu really at the Vatican?" and "The secret they tried to delete." Meanwhile, within Catholic circles, Whispers spread quietly but persistently. Some believed the Pope had sought to speak with Reeves about humanitarian causes. Others, more esoterically minded, speculated about ancient prophecies and secret roles in the coming age. The man with sorrowful eyes, one fringe blog post claimed, was foretold to come at the twilight of a papal reign, bearing witness to a great transition. The Vatican remained silent. No press release, no acknowledgement of any visitor by that name. No footage from the security cameras was released to the public. Reporters who pressed the issue during daily briefings were met with soft deflections. "We cannot comment on hypothetical visits," said one official. "The Holy Father meets with many individuals in private capacities. We do not discuss such matters." Yet something in the public consciousness had shifted. The story was too strange, too cinematic, to disappear completely. It lingered like the scent of incense after Mass, faint, elusive, but undeniable. People wanted to believe something important had occurred behind those ancient walls. Something more than a simple visit. Something meaningful. Something secret. In the days that followed, artists began rendering the moment in digital paintings. Threads explored the symbolism of a meeting between modern celebrity and ancient institution. Even AI-generated audio clips pretending to simulate what the conversation might have sounded like began circulating online, accompanied by captions like, "Listen to the final words of the Pope," or "The light in the silence." Those few moments, the black coat, the silent nod, the disappearing figures, became a new kind of myth, floating somewhere between internet folklore and real-world mystery. And though nothing was confirmed and no new footage ever surfaced, the image remained fixed in people's minds. Keanu Reeves standing at the threshold of the Vatican, just before everything changed. As the strange news surrounding Keanu Reeves' appearance at the Vatican spread quietly but insistently through digital back channels, the wider public began to catch wind of the brewing mystery. Initially dismissed by traditional media, the story found fertile ground in online spaces where curiosity outpaced skepticism. Within days, whispers turned into rumors, and rumors transformed into intricate narratives. It was no longer a matter of speculation whether Keanu Reeves had entered the Vatican. Now the question shifted to why he had been summoned in the first place. Some claimed to have insider knowledge, though none could present verifiable evidence. A few Vatican watchers asserted that Pope Francis had personally requested the meeting. It was not a formal visit scheduled through diplomatic channels, nor a public gesture meant for cameras and press releases. This, they insisted, was something altogether different. A private audience arranged outside the normal procedures, shielded from bureaucratic oversight. No Swiss Guard were seen escorting him in broad daylight. No official communiques were issued. Just a fleeting glimpse of a globally recognizable figure vanishing into the ancient stone labyrinths of the Holy See. Speculation ran rampant. Why would the Pope, a man who traditionally met with world leaders, religious dignitaries, and scholars, seek a one-on-one with an actor, even one as universally respected as Keanu Reeves? Theories flooded social media. Some suggested the Pope admired Reeves' philanthropic efforts and wanted to discuss joint humanitarian initiatives. Others, more inclined toward the mystical, proposed that Reeves represented something deeper, a bridge between secular celebrity culture and timeless spiritual truth. Forums buzzed with cryptic phrases like light bearer, chosen witness, and messenger of the coming age. Journalists, sensing a potential scoop, began to dig through archives for any possible connection between the two figures. They found very little at first, but then a few sharp-eyed researchers unearthed a series of older interviews, overlooked at the time, but now gleaming with new significance. In a 2016 conversation with a Jesuit magazine, Pope Francis spoke about the need for modern-day figures familiar to the masses who carry the burden of sorrow with dignity and still inspire hope. He mentioned no names, but the description fit Reeves so well that bloggers latched onto it immediately. Even more compelling was a 2019 interview from a small, independent Catholic radio station. During a relaxed, almost philosophical dialogue about art, humanity, and forgiveness, Pope Francis mused about an actor with eyes full of light, saying that he had once watched a film that moved him deeply, not because of the script or the production, but because the leading man's face seemed to carry a profound, unspoken sorrow, a sorrow that pointed beyond itself toward redemption. These comments, forgotten by the mainstream, now resurfaced with viral momentum. Clips of the interview, hastily subtitled and set against dramatic music, flooded TikTok and Instagram. On YouTube, compilation videos pieced together every known instance where Pope Francis had spoken about modern figures who embodied humility and grace. Inevitably, they all circled back to Keanu Reeves. The parallels were too poetic to ignore, too perfectly constructed for the internet's hunger for myth-making. The narrative grew. Perhaps the Pope had seen in Reeves a living symbol of the values he cherished: compassion, humility, resilience in the face of suffering. Perhaps he had wanted to entrust him with a message, not to kings or cardinals, but to the common people who found meaning not in ancient texts but in modern stories, on screens large and small. Perhaps Reeves, unknowingly, had become the bearer of an invisible torch passed from one era to the next. Academic circles began debating the implications. Professors of theology wrote op-eds about the evolving relationship between sacred leadership and celebrity influence in the digital age. Cultural critics discussed the hunger for authentic moral figures in a time when institutions seemed increasingly hollow. Psychologists weighed in, analyzing why the public so eagerly embraced the idea of solitary, quiet actor as a vessel for profound spiritual communication. Meanwhile, alternative communities spun even more exotic theories. Fringe esoteric channels suggested that Reeves and Pope Francis shared secret knowledge about hidden prophecies recorded in the restricted sections of the Vatican archives. One widely shared video claimed that the meeting marked the activation of an ancient pact between light-bearers across generations, a moment prophesied in obscure apocryphal texts. Of course, more grounded voices offered skeptical takes. They argued that projecting so much meaning onto a few vague comments and a grainy photograph was dangerous, bordering on idolatry. Journalists warned about the risks of misinformation spiraling into mass delusion. Yet for every skeptical article published, 10 more user-generated videos, threads, and memes fed the flames of intrigue. Amid all this, Reeves himself remained silent. No public statements, no evidences. His absence only fueled the fire. Speculation shifted from why did the Pope meet with Keanu to what burden had the Pope placed upon him? Had he been given a mission, a warning, a blessing? Theories multiplied like stars in a darkening sky, each twinkling with its own seductive certainty. Some imaginative souls even claimed that the Pope's final public blessing, given just days before his death, contained subtle hand gestures and coded phrases signaling the transfer of a secret legacy. Entire Reddit communities devoted themselves to analyzing every frame of video footage from that blessing, seeking hidden meanings invisible to the casual observer. It became a cultural phenomenon, an idea too tantalizing to resist, that the end of one life and the burdening of another had occurred in secrecy, witnessed only by ancient stones and whispering winds. Keanu Reeves, reluctant hero of the digital age, had become more than a movie star. In the minds of millions, he had become the silent emissary of something lost, something needed, something luminous, and all of it, this vast web of speculation, hope, skepticism, and wonder, sprouted from a single fleeting meeting whose true words and purpose would remain hidden from the world. The day following the solemn and globally televised funeral of Pope Francis, a strange silence began to envelop the name Keanu Reeves. At first, it seemed almost coincidental, a natural pause after the waves of rumors linking him to the Vatican. But as hours turned into days, and days into a creeping unease, the realization began to spread. Keanu had disappeared. There were no social media updates, no candid paparazzi shots capturing him leaving a cafe or strolling through a park, no sightings at airports, movie sets, or charity events. It was as if he had simply stepped off the map, into a void beyond the public eye. His agent, when finally reached by persistent reporters, issued a short and carefully worded statement. Mr. Reeves has taken a personal pause for reflection. All scheduled projects remain active and are not affected. No further details were given. No location mentioned. No timeline suggested for his return. This ambiguity only served to pour gasoline on the already blazing fire of speculation. Across Twitter, Reddit, and YouTube, theories exploded like fireworks. Some claimed he had entered a monastery, seeking solitude to process the spiritual burden allegedly placed upon him by the Pope. Others insisted he had gone into hiding, fearing for his life after learning a truth too dangerous for public disclosure. A few more fantastical voices whispered that he had transcended into a different plane of existence, chosen to carry a light humanity was not yet ready to receive. TikTok users compiled montages of his last public appearances, looking for signs of distress or hidden meaning in his expressions. Commentators on podcasts spoke of the weight visible in his eyes during his last interviews. Every archived photograph and video clip became a subject of amateur psychoanalysis, dissected frame by frame as if each pixel could unlock the mystery of his vanishing. Popular entertainment news shows, initially reluctant to fan the flames, soon gave in to the public's insatiable hunger for answers. "Where is Keanu?" became a headline seen on morning talk shows, internet banners, and pop culture blogs. Entire panels were convened to discuss the implications of his disappearance. Was it a publicity stunt, a nervous breakdown, or, as many now believed, a direct consequence of whatever had transpired in that final meeting with Pope Francis? Subreddits and Discord servers dedicated to the phenomenon sprang up almost overnight. Users organized timelines, pieced together flight records, cross-referenced rumored sightings. Satellite imagery of private retreats and obscure monasteries were analyzed with unsettling intensity. Blurry photographs of bearded men in dark coats circulated as possible new Keanus. Someone even started a digital clock online counting the seconds since he had last been seen in public, titled simply "The Long Silence." Amid the chaos, darker theories emerged. Some believed he had been silenced, whether by secret organizations tied to the Vatican, intelligence agencies, or corporate powers threatened by whatever message he might have carried. An especially viral thread suggested that hidden groups guarding ancient religious secrets could not allow even a whisper of certain knowledge to escape into the modern world. If Keanu now knew too much, then he might either be protected or imprisoned for his own safety, or for theirs. On the other hand, a quieter but persistent group argued that Keanu's disappearance was a choice, an act of profound responsibility. They theorized that whatever was entrusted to him was so sacred, so transformative, that he could no longer live as he once had. He would need time to understand it, to grow into whatever role he had been given. His vanishing was not an absence, but a metamorphosis. A haunting narrative began to circulate, the idea that some messages, once received, demand silence. That true knowledge reshapes not just actions, but existence itself. Keanu, bearer of light or burden of truth, could not simply go back to the red carpets and press junkets after his encounter. Something irreversible had happened, something that placed him apart from the world he had once known. Television specials started airing with ominous titles like The Last Conversation, What Keanu Heard, and Disappearing into the Light, The Reeves Enigma. Mockumentaries blended real footage with dramatizations, blurring the lines between fact and fiction until even earnest viewers struggled to separate what was real from what was myth. Conspiracy influencers, always hungry for the next viral saga, declared his disappearance the greatest celebrity mystery of the decade, surpassing even the most elaborate urban legends. In the academic world, sociologists and media theorists published hurried essays exploring the cultural impact of Keanu's silence. They noted how easily and rapidly a vacuum of information became a fertile breeding ground for myth. Some likened him to ancient figures of legend, heroes who disappear into forests, deserts, or mountains before returning transformed, if they return at all. The modern digital landscape had simply adapted those ancient myths to its own hyper-connected architecture. Despite the noise, there were no leaks from his inner circle, no anonymous staffer revealing his location, no grainy footage from security cameras spotting him at a remote villa or a mountain monastery. Those closest to him remained steadfastly silent, amplifying the sense that this was not an accident or oversight. It was a deliberate choice, protected by those who understood its gravity. And so the silence stretched, thin and sharp, across the consciousness of those who followed the story. Days blurred into weeks. The initial frenzy calmed into a more solemn fascination. Somewhere, people believed Keanu Reeves was walking through a different kind of darkness. Not the absence of light, but the heavy, expectant dark before revelation. No one could say how long he would remain unseen, or what he might bring back with him if he ever returned. For now, all they had were questions, echoes, and the unshakable feeling that something extraordinary had happened. Something just beyond the reach of news headlines, PR statements, and even the internet's relentless gaze. Something waiting in the silence. Several days after the world had begun to accept Keanu Reeves' unexplained disappearance, when the initial frenzy had settled into a quieter but deeper current of fascination, a new event reignited the global conversation. Without warning, a short video began circulating across TikTok and YouTube, seemingly uploaded by an anonymous user. The title was simple, almost cryptic, "The Last Message." In the thumbnail, barely visible, was a blurred silhouette recognizable to millions. Keanu Reeves, seated alone in a dimly lit room, his features shrouded in shadow. The video itself lasted no more than 15 seconds. Shot with a single fixed camera, the frame captured only Keanu from the waist up. He wore a dark shirt, and his hair, slightly disheveled, fell loosely around his face. The lighting was minimal, casting deep, dramatic shadows that made the contours of his face appear more sculpted, more haunted. His posture was calm but heavy, as though he carried a weight invisible to the viewer. There was no music, no cuts, no editing tricks, just raw footage, as intimate and unfiltered as a confession. He looked directly at the camera for a long, motionless moment. Then, in a voice that was both firm and strangely gentle, he spoke a single sentence. He asked me not to fear the light. After that, he lowered his gaze, closed his eyes briefly, and the video ended with an abrupt black screen. Within hours, the video exploded across the internet. It was re-uploaded, re-edited, dissected, and speculated upon at an almost frenetic pace. Influencers made reaction videos, commentators speculated endlessly, and ordinary users reposted it with their own captions, ranging from awe to confusion to fear. Hashtags like hashtag Fear the Light, hashtag Keanu Message, and hashtag Pope's Secret trended simultaneously on multiple platforms. The world, it seemed, was not ready to let go of the mystery that had so suddenly gripped its imagination. Interpretations varied wildly. Some believed the phrase was a direct quote from Pope Francis, a fragment of a private conversation now tantalizingly dangled before the public. The religious communities, especially those already attuned to prophecy and spiritual warfare narratives, pounced on the wording. Light, in theological discourse, often symbolized truth, salvation, divinity. Was the Pope warning against a false light? Was he affirming a coming revelation? Or was it a deeply personal reassurance in the face of mortality? Meanwhile, others saw a darker meaning. Fringe theorists interpreted the message as an oblique reference to death itself. The light, often cited in near-death experiences as the threshold between life and the unknown beyond. Perhaps the Pope, sensing his end was near, imparted to Keanu a final piece of advice: not to fear the crossing into death, not to fear whatever came next. The video inspired an immediate flood of explainers and deep dives. TikTok spiritualists claimed to receive visions after meditating on the phrase. YouTube theologians posted hour-long breakdowns, parsing every word, analyzing Keanu's tone, his body language, the very grain of the video for hidden clues. Twitter threads emerged attempting to decode a supposed cipher hidden in the cadence of his speech. Some even examined the precise time the video was uploaded, cross-referencing it with obscure numerological charts and astrological alignments. Conspiracy theorists, long entrenched in their own labyrinthine narratives, integrated the video seamlessly into broader tales of secret societies, hidden prophecies, and world-changing revelations. Some connected Keanu's message to ancient Gnostic texts speaking of a bearer of light who would come in times of great upheaval. Others accused unnamed powers of trying to suppress the true meaning behind the video, pointing to rapid takedowns and alleged shadow bans as evidence of an orchestrated cover-up. Mainstream media, caught between skepticism and the need for ratings, approached the story cautiously. News anchors discussed the phenomenon as a human interest piece, marveling at how a 15-second video could spark such intense global conversation. Psychologists were brought onto talk shows to explain the psychological mechanisms behind mass fascination, projection, and myth-making. Cultural critics wrote op-eds about society's hunger for meaning in an increasingly chaotic and fractured world, and how figures like Keanu Reeves, perceived as humble, wounded, yet fundamentally good, became ideal vessels for such projections. All the while, Keanu remained silent. There were no clarifications, no follow-up posts, no statements from his representatives. In the absence of further information, the internet filled the void with creativity, hope, fear, and wonder. Artists created paintings and digital collages inspired by the phrase. Musicians composed ambient tracks and ballads titled "Fear Not the Light." Independent filmmakers posted tribute videos imagining what the full conversation between Keanu and the Pope might have been. More disturbingly, sects began to form around the message. Small, loosely organized groups online declared themselves interpreters of the light, setting up forums and Discord servers dedicated to decoding what they saw as a new sacred revelation. Some called for public gatherings to prepare for the light, blending traditional religious ritual with New Age mysticism and digital culture. Authorities began to monitor these developments quietly, wary of the potential for fringe radicalization. And yet, despite the inevitable descent into chaos, for many, the core of the message retained a strange and solemn beauty. "Do not fear the light" became a kind of mantra for those grappling with personal loss, existential fear, and the creeping despair of the modern age. It offered comfort without specifics, hope without doctrine, and in that ambiguity, it touched something profound and universal. The video, raw and minimal as it was, had accomplished what no studio film, no carefully managed interview, no award-winning documentary could have done. It bypassed the defenses of cynicism and irony, reaching a deeper, more vulnerable place in the human psyche. It reminded people of the mysteries that remained, of the questions without easy answers, and of the light, whatever it might ultimately mean, that still called to them from beyond the reach of fear. In the wake of the viral explosion surrounding Keanu Reeves' mysterious video, a new revelation surfaced, one that reignited the public's frenzied obsession and further deepened the cultural divide forming around his name. An anonymous source, claiming to be a monk closely connected to the inner circle of Pope Francis, reached out to several independent journalists and small news outlets. This monk, whose identity remained carefully concealed through scrambled audio recordings and blurred video interviews, asserted that the meeting between Keanu and the Pope had not been accidental nor casual. It had been intentional, solemn, and profound. According to the monk, Pope Francis had grown increasingly concerned in the final months of his life about the spiritual disconnection he observed in the world. He believed that traditional institutions, heavy with centuries of dogma and ceremony, were losing their ability to reach the hearts of ordinary people. His vision was radical, yet deeply sincere. The light of compassion, understanding, and hope needed new carriers, ones unbound by ancient hierarchies or religious titles. Figures like Keanu Reeves, humble, authentic, and beloved by millions across cultural and national divides, represented a bridge between old wisdom and new generations. The monk explained that the Pope had seen in Keanu a living embodiment of the universal values that transcended doctrine: kindness without expectation, sorrow tempered by grace, resilience without bitterness. He believed that entrusting such a figure with a message, even an unwritten and undefined one, might ignite a spark where official decrees and theological debates could not. The meeting had been an act of faith in humanity itself, a passing of silent torch rather than the conferring of a formal mission. The anonymous testimony unleashed a second wave of global reaction. Media outlets, now unable to ignore the scale of public interest, ran headlines like "The Last Will of Pope Francis," "A Star as Messenger," and "The Secret Conversation That Could Change the World." Theories flourished in all directions, and once again, the internet divided sharply into camps. For one side, Keanu Reeves became a near-messianic figure, a symbol of light chosen to guide a weary world toward renewal. Fan pages transformed into quasi-religious spaces, filled with artwork depicting Keanu holding radiant orbs of light, leading crowds through darkened landscapes. Memes co-opted ancient imagery, placing his face over medieval icons of saints, blending reverence with modern adoration. Hashtags like #Keanu the Lightbearer and #Chosen by Francis surged across Twitter and Instagram, gathering millions of interactions. Supporters organized online vigils, group meditations, and even digital pilgrimages, sharing maps of places they believed Keanu might have traveled during his silence. They spoke of him not as an actor, but as a vessel for a broader spiritual awakening, someone who could inspire change not through sermons, but through presence, humility, and silent example. They quoted his past interviews, finding hidden wisdom in his modest answers about life, loss, and perseverance. For them, Keanu had become more than human. He was the carrier of an unnamed hope. But there was an opposing current equally powerful and equally vocal. Skeptics, cynics, and critics denounced the growing cult of personality as naive at best and dangerously delusional at worst. They argued that the entire narrative had been carefully manipulated, either by opportunistic forces around Keanu or by unseen interests exploiting public vulnerability in a chaotic age. They pointed to the timing of the leaks, the theatrical vagueness of the video, and the convenient anonymity of the monk's testimony. Popular talk shows and late-night comedians lampooned the situation mercilessly. Satirical sketches depicted Keanu in papal robes or handing out proclamations on Hollywood red carpets. Think pieces flooded major newspapers, warning about the blurring of celebrity culture with spiritual hunger, about the risks of placing mortal figures on pedestals crafted from collective longing. Conservative religious voices condemned the entire phenomenon as heretical, accusing both the media and secular culture of twisting the legacy of Pope Francis for entertainment. They warned that the replacement of spiritual depth with viral mythology would erode true faith, reducing centuries of sacred tradition to the level of internet fads. Meanwhile, fringe fundamentalists spun darker tales, suggesting that Reeves' rising status was a deception, a false light meant to mislead humanity away from authentic spiritual truth. Caught between adoration and suspicion, Keanu's silence became ever more potent. Every day he refrained from clarifying his role. The myth grew taller, casting longer shadows across an already divided global consciousness. News anchors debated whether he owed the world an explanation. Commentators argued about whether silence itself was a form of manipulation or a necessary act of humility. Public opinion polls split almost evenly between those who saw him as an emergent spiritual leader and those who dismissed the entire story as a dangerous spectacle. The phrase from his video, "He asked me not to fear the light," took on increasingly polarized meanings. To his followers, it was a universal call to hope, courage, and awakening. To his detractors, it became a chilling reminder of how easily humanity's thirst for meaning could be redirected into fantasy, distraction, and mass delusion. Art, fashion, and music all began to absorb the narrative. Street murals appeared depicting Keanu surrounded by luminous halos. Indie musicians released albums titled after fragments of the growing legend. Clothing brands printed cryptic messages onto t-shirts and hoodies. Fear not the light. Public spaces, both digital and physical, buzzed with the energy of a society teetering between enlightenment and hysteria. Sociologists and philosophers published urgent essays trying to map the phenomenon. Some compared it to historical waves of millenarianism, where populations faced with uncertainty and loss sought salvation figures to anchor their hopes. Others argued that in an age of decentralized information and fragmented belief systems, figures like Keanu represented a new form of collective myth-making, one no longer controlled by churches, states, or traditional authorities, but born spontaneously from the will of the people. Still, amid all the noise, the essential mystery remained untouched. What had truly passed between Keanu and Pope Francis in those final hours? What had been said, what had been entrusted, and what, if anything, was meant to follow? The answers, if they existed, lay buried beneath layers of interpretation, emotion, and projection, as elusive as the light that Keanu had been asked not to fear. As the world spiraled deeper into speculation, admiration, skepticism, and obsession, Keanu Reeves remained silent. The internet roared with countless voices trying to speak for him, trying to pull meaning from every second of available footage, every nuance of every word he had ever spoken. Think tanks and spiritual forums debated his intentions. Influencers turned his silence into content. Journalists crafted entire feature pieces about what it meant for a celebrity to say nothing in an age obsessed with instant reactions. Yet through it all, Keanu offered no statements, no interviews, no clarifications. For weeks, his absence had been almost total, feeding the idea that whatever had transpired in those final days with Pope Francis was too sacred or too dangerous to be brought into the glare of public scrutiny. Every attempt to locate him yielded only vague hints. Unconfirmed sightings at monasteries, whispers about isolated retreats in remote countryside villas, blurred images of a man in black entering secluded chapels. None of it could be definitively linked to him. In an era when anonymity seemed impossible, Keanu Reeves had managed to become invisible. Then, one day, without announcement or warning, he reappeared. It happened in the narrow, twisting streets of Rome, far from the tourist hubs and the grandeur of Vatican City. A single handheld camera captured the moment, shaky but clear enough to recognize him instantly. Keanu walked alone, dressed simply in dark jeans and a black jacket, his hair slightly longer and unkempt, his beard a little fuller. He moved at a measured pace, as if not in any hurry to reach a destination, but rather fully present in each step he took. There was no security detail flanking him, no assistance, no crowd of fans. Just Keanu and the cobbled stones underfoot, the warm Roman sun casting long shadows behind him. His head was slightly tilted upward, his gaze fixed not on the bustling street ahead, but on the sun itself, now beginning its slow descent toward evening. The golden light illuminated his face with a soft, almost ethereal glow, revealing an expression of profound peace. He paused for a moment at an intersection where two alleys met, standing still in the sunlight, breathing it in as though he were drinking from some invisible, infinite well. His features did not reflect the weariness of a man burdened by the weight of global adoration or relentless rumor. Instead, they radiated a simple, grounded serenity, a man neither running from nor chasing anything. Without hesitation, he turned down a narrower alley, its walls ancient and worn, bearing the marks of countless lives and forgotten stories. The camera, caught off guard, attempted to follow, but lost him quickly as he slipped into the shadowed passageway. Within seconds, he had vanished, swallowed by the winding arteries of the eternal city. The footage ended abruptly, as if reality itself had refused to follow him further. Moments later, In the edit of the footage that would soon flood every social media platform, words appeared across a black screen in simple white letters. Light does not require explanation. It simply is. The world watched in stunned silence. No dramatic music accompanied the scene. No narrator spoke to frame it in a particular context. It was left open, raw, and naked for interpretation. It was a mirror reflecting back whatever each individual chose to see. Some viewers wept openly, overwhelmed by a sense of closure they could not fully articulate. Others raged at the perceived evasion, accusing him of manipulating public emotions without responsibility. Many simply watched in silence, feeling something shift inside themselves, something they could not name. The footage became iconic almost immediately. News outlets played it on loop. Artists recreated it in paintings, digital renderings, and sculptures. Philosophers dissected it, psychologists analyzed it, theologians meditated on it. Memes circulated jokingly referring to Keanu as the last prophet or Saint John Wick. Documentaries were rushed into production, titles swirling around ideas of mystery, destiny, and the hunger for meaning in an increasingly fractured world. But beyond the noise, beyond the clever headlines and viral trends, something quieter and more lasting took root. People began using the closing line, "Light does not require explanation. It simply is," in eulogies, wedding vows, motivational speeches, and personal journals. It seeped into everyday life, detached from its origin, becoming a kind of secular scripture for those who crave belief without the burdens of dogma. No one saw Keanu again for a long time after that brief appearance. It was as if he had fulfilled whatever role had been asked of him, however unknowingly, and had stepped back into the shadows without demand for recognition or reward. There were occasional rumors, sightings whispered through online forums or conspiracy threads, but nothing confirmed, nothing tangible. And in the end, it didn't seem to matter. The moment had been enough. The silence that had begun as an absence became a presence in itself, a reminder that not every mystery must be solved, not every message must be explained, not every bearer of light must also be a teacher or savior. In a world addicted to immediacy and constant noise, Keanu's quiet departure stood as a monument to another way of being, a way that trusted the light to be what it was, without fear, without need for validation, without apology. Some said the encounter with Pope Francis had changed him forever. Others said he had always been that way, and the world had simply never noticed until now. Either way, his final silent message lingered in the collective consciousness, not as a command or a doctrine, but as a simple, enduring truth. Light does not require explanation. It simply is.